Hello, we welcome you in the Media Center Ukraine of Ukrinform. My name is Alina Frolova, and as of now this is the briefing which is devoted to the terroristic act in Olenivka, the act of terror. This is the 40 days since this event took place, so we invited the relatives of the prisoners of war who are now in Olenivka, and we would like to introduce them to you. Natalia Zarytska, a wife of the prisoner of war in Olenivka, chair of the Ladies of Steel Council of Wives and Mothers of Ukraine's Defenders. Natalya Kravtsova, a mother of a prisoners of war, co-founder of the Ladies of Steel Council. Nelya Shastun, a mother of two fighters, a soldier killed in Mariupol and a prisoner of war who is in Olenivka, and Anna Kalinchuk, a Tony who is monitoring this case of the prisoners of war. Natalia, I give the floor first to you. Could you please give us the overall information about what has taken place during these 40 days? Is there any contact with the international organizations? Are you in touch with the relatives? What do you know now? 40 days have passed since the terrible act of terror took place in the camp of detention of the Ukrainian prisoners of war in Olenivka. Let us please commemorate the memory of the defenders of Ukraine who died with a minute of silence. My name is Natalia Zarytska. I am the wife of the prisoner of war who went through Azovstal and was captured. On the 29th of July, in the camp of Olenivka, there was an awful act of terror taking place, as a consequence of which there were Ukrainian defenders who died and were injured. And my husband was in this capture, and I don't know whether he is alive. For 40 days. During these days, we didn't get an answer for a single question. Who died? Who is injured or wounded? What's the precise number of victims and affected people? In spite of the norms of international humanitarian law, the Ukrainian prisoners of war did not meet with any representatives of the International Committee of the Red Cross. We cannot hear and listen that the Russian Federation is blocking access to our prisoners of war. The fact that the Red Cross just from time to time is announcing that they cannot get to the camp in Olenivka is just killing us. The tragedy in Olenivka has shed light onto the disastrous situation with the Ukrainian prisoners of war and on the fact how the enemy is creating barbarian sites, demonstrating their impunity and despise to the overall acknowledged rules of coexistence. And again, for 25 days after the tragedy in Olenivka, on the 22nd of August, the United Nations have created the group to investigate the act of terror in this colony. The Secretary General of the UN informed that he decided to send a mission to find out and fact-find the tragedy in Olenivka. But the representative of the Secretary General in the UN announced that the Commission so far cannot begin the investigation as the situation at the event is still dangerous for the visit of the UN representatives. It is hard to assess this announcement, but we understand that the creation of a commission without the access to the place of the crime will not help to achieve justice for the Ukrainian defenders who, being captured, were killed, murdered and injured. This is the awful violation of all of the international agreements and guarantees. The fact that even the whole powerful UN mission cannot for 40 days reach the place of the public execution of the prisoners of war, as well as it cannot reach as one of the oldest international organizations, the ICRC, witnesses that our prisoners of war are now in deadly danger. You know, every act, every deed leads to consequences. The crime against humanity committed in Olenivka, instead of instant investigation, led to silence, lack of action, and again concerns. This is the encouragement for the crime, such impunity. And if the world is afraid to acknowledge the real state of affairs and will not stop the evil of the terrorism in its, how Olenivka showed, we should expect for even more horrid and bloody massive crimes and cruel executions. We claim justice and take into liability the Russian Federation, the country which detained our prisoners of war. We urge the UN to use the efficient and instant mechanism to investigate the act of terror in Olenivka and to make Russia to comply with the norms of international humanitarian law. Today, not a single norm of Geneva Conventions about the prisoners of war is not complied by Russia. We do not have any data about the location of our prisoners of war. We are not in touch with them. This is autumn already. Yesterday I took my warm blanket. Today I put on my warmer jacket. And in the morning I drank my hot tea. But how can our guys and ladies be warm when they are captured? What do they eat if in the colony number 120 in Olenivka they don't even have tap water? Just because of this thought, I am soaked with horror. My husband doesn't have elementary things, as well as his brethren. And after the hellish heat and thirst, they are tortured by cold. The prisoners of war put on just the remnants of the clothes, the rest of the winter clothes which they had in May, leaving Azovstal. This is the disaster with the medicines and hygiene products. I have a question then. When will the humanitarian convoy be sent to the camps? Russia does not cope with the detention of the prisoners of war. It executes them and tortures them. And in this disastrous situation, it seems that there is no way out, but I'm sure that the light will always prevail over the darkness, and our heroes, having survived all of those inhuman tortures, and not in vain. That is why I, together with all the rest of the mothers and wives, I urge not to allow the barbarian ideas take place, the awful and unjust execution of the warriors who with their faith and truth were protecting their own land and their people. The ways out of this situation are the following: the liberation of our prisoners of war, or simultaneous exchange of all for all, or the extraction of the prisoners of war to the third country. Thank you, Natalia. Let us now talk to Natalya Kravtsova, and then we will have the Q&A session. Hello, everybody. According to the information which was made public by the Russian resources during the night on the 29th of July in Olenivka, there were up to 200 Ukrainian prisoners of war perishing and injured. According to the opinion of the international experts and criminalists, the people were just blown up from the inside. And the first videos and pictures from the place of this tragedy witness about that. The protectors and defenders of Azovstal, who the enemy could not fight in the battle, they just tortured them and cruelly killed them. But there was no proper response from the world for 40 days already. This act of terror was also against the relatives of the Ukrainian warriors. For the 40 days they are now in the information vacuum, and they don't know anything about the fate of their relatives. They are living in their own hell, dying every day because there is no information how many people died, who is injured, who is wounded, whether they are alive. We don't have this information. Now the enemy is just killing the Ukrainian prisoners of war, which have to be protected by the norms of international humanitarian law, and the world is just putting up with that. I'm just asking myself, why did the world respond the execution of the ISIS and did not respond the act of terror in Olenivka? Why the jail in Guantanamo was closed and the investigation was conducted, but the killers and torturers of our warriors are still not punished? We don't need the words of concern. We don't need excuses in your helplessness, or we don't need revenge. We need justice. Thank you. Natalia, you have a son there, right? Yes, thank you. Nelya Shastun, the mother of 2 fighters, please. Hello, everyone. During the act of terror in Olenivka, not a single employee of the colony or the DPR representative or the Russian military who were guarding this premise were not affected by this explosion. Out of the published photos, it is obvious that this is just the killing of the Ukrainian prisoners of war, and it was cynically planned. The Russian Federation has published the list of the prisoners of war, which as if are dead, but simultaneously they are not allowing any international organizations to confirm or cancel this list. The Embassy of Russia to the United Kingdom has made public the tweet where they announced that the warriors of the Azov regiment deserve for the humiliating death. I am the resident of Mariupol, and I'm asking, what for? Because they are real warriors? Because they are the defenders of their own motherland? Because they were protecting the city and the people till the last moment, just because they are the real patriots of their country? I'm a mother of 2 sons, 2 fighters of the Azov regiment. My older son died protecting the city of Mariupol, his native city. My youngest son, according to the decree of the commandment, after more than 80 days of heroic protection and defense of Azovstal, together with his military brethren, left the territory of the plant and is now captured in Olenivka. We claim the liberation of all of the prisoners of war, or their extraction to the third country. Thank you. Anna Kalinchuk, the attorney. Anna, could you please comment on the way of investigation of what has taken place, first of all? Secondly, are there any investigations at the international level? And altogether, what are the norms of international law? How is it possible to conduct this investigation? How is it possible to take to liability all those Russian military? Hello, my name is Anna Kalinchuk. I'm a Ukrainian attorney, and also I'm conducting the maintenance and of the cases of some of the prisoners of war, including the defenders of Azovstal. So really, the act of terror in Olenivka, which was targeted military crime of the international nature, in fact leads to questions only among Ukrainians. And we are now in a state where every Ukrainian would like to express concerns that the civilized world is exceptionally concerning, though they have the tools and opportunities in their hands for the different response on this event. Ukraine as a state, from its side, has conducted several actions which were necessary to register the fact of the crime. the committed crime. The Office of the Prosecutor General introduced this data into the Unified Register of the pre-trial investigation, and this investigation is going on. The facts are being collected. We define and find out the circumstances and the people who were taking part in these events, and this is just the national investigation. That is our internal one. Simultaneously, as it was already mentioned by the previous speakers, whatever we heard during these 40 days, that the UN has created some group of people which potentially someday maybe will be able to register and document the facts of the committed crimes, though in fact, as it is mentioned by the Secretary General of the UN, it will be just a mission which does not have any authorities to collect evidence, just to find out some of the facts. We do not understand how the human rights activists have to look at this aim of the UN mission. What is their aim in this procedure of fact-finding? Because the fact is obvious for us, the Ukrainians, that it was the targeted murder, which is characterized by several signs and numerous motives which the aggressor country, Russian Federation, was following committing this act. It is obvious for us that the act of terror in Olenivka was created to kill the defenders of Ukraine, that it was done during the moment to hide the signs of torture of prisoners of war who were captured by the aggressor country, that it was also the psychological operation against the population of Ukraine for destabilization and demoralization of the Ukrainians and the authorities of the country, including. Thus, if I sum it up, as of today, for me as a human rights activist, it is still incomprehensible if the International Committee of the Red Cross is not allowed to come to Olenivka. Then how frequently did they apply with this request? Where did they visit this territory? Because as of today, we can only hear announcements that they are not allowed to go there. But this fact is just, in real life, looks like requests sent there. And the so-called Donetsk People's Republic or the government of Russian Federation do not respond to those requests. And the International Committee of Red Cross is considering it to be as if they are not allowed. They've never been there. And they've never been to Olenivka after the act of terror has taken place. We can see some incapability of this organization in real acts, in real use of the tools which it has in its hands. As it was already mentioned above, we have the Geneva Convention on the prisoners of war. The Russian Federation is the participant of this convention, so the Red Cross has the right to pose questions to the government of Russian Federation, what the Russian Federation is doing to comply with the conditions of this convention. And if it does not comply with the conditions of this convention, then the ICRC and the UN have the opportunity to punish Russian Federation for the incompliance of the norms, with the norms. So as of today, after the act of terror in Olenivka, Russia still sits at the same table with the civilized world, conducts the conversations, and in these conversations the Russian Federation doesn't hear a single question about what has really taken place there, and no one claims any single reports from them. It further can lead to the situation where Russian Federation, during all of this period of time, during 40 days, will just fake the evidence, create the fake evidence of their committed crime, and it will make impossible taking them into liability in the future. I can instantly ask you about the extraction. Were there any precedents of a similar extraction, and what does it mean from the legal point of view? Which guarantees should be given in this case? The same Geneva Convention foresees the opportunity of extraction, the procedure of extraction onto the territory of the third country. According to our case, Russian Federation is giving the prisoners of war to any third country which is not the participant of the war. And our citizens are there till the end of the warfare, till the end of the war, and they don't have the right to take part directly in the combats on the Ukrainian side. The world knows such examples when the extraction was used onto the territory of the third countries. Thank you. I invite you to the Q&A session, and I have the first question about the overall number of prisoners of war who left Azovstal territory. Do you know that there are women among them? Do you know anything about the fate of women who used to be there? As far as we know, from the territory of Azovstal plant, there were 2.5 thousand Ukrainian defenders living, the defenders of Mariupol city. This is a huge number. All of them are now in capture. Only 95 people were exchanged from Azovstal. So in fact, the hardest is for those who are severely wounded and for the girls, the ladies. We know that the enemy has the pregnant women and also a woman with a child. We need to liberate them as soon as possible. There is a girl who is in the 9th month of pregnancy. She will give the birth in the end of September. How vile they are to keep this girl in capture as a hostage and to pressure the Ukrainian side and the whole world to exchange her. So how do you interact with the Ukrainian authorities, with the center on the exchange of prisoners of war, and are you in touch with them? Do you have any actions which you can see which could be efficient, which would give us some hopes? The families of the prisoners of war, we are constantly in touch with them, including the coordination headquarters on the prisoners of war. This headquarters has the hotline, and it is working offline as well. That is Spaska Street 37. We are meeting from time to time in this headquarters. There are some of the representatives of all of the authorized authorities which are dealing with or who are affiliated with the issues of prisoners of warriors or missing in action or killed in action. So of course there is such interaction. But as we have found out, this is the formula. The Pareto principle, 80 to 20. We understand that 20% depends on us, how to bring back our defenders home. But lots of things really depend on the enemy. And that is why we addressed the whole world today, and the international organizations as well, who have some leverages of impact or pressure. We see that they need some of the efficient leverages against Russian Federation for it to comply with the international agreements and guarantees. Did you conduct any negotiations with any third countries which could become the participants of this scheme on extraction? This is the question to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to the government. We are just the relatives. If you remember, when our defenders were at Azovstal plant, we addressed the president of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey. We were supported by Mustafa Dzhemilev, the head of Crimean Tatar people, me and Natalia and another wife of the border service employee and the Marine. We flew to Turkey and we visited and also we addressed the president of China, Xi Jinping, from Istanbul. and from the Ukrainian platform as well. So, of course, we are sure that the good will prevail over the evil. The world should unite its efforts, and there shouldn't be any fear or indifference or uncertainty. Our guys and ladies there, they did not have any excuses when they had to defend their country and us and you. The defenders of Mariupol just won some time for Ukraine, and Ukraine is winning some time for the whole world. There were no excuses. So why now we can see some passive behavior in liberation of our warriors, we as the relatives? Well, you know, it is incomprehensible and it's painful for us. Thank you. Are there any questions? Could you introduce yourselves? Pachko. You just saying that you were speaking to Mr. Erdogan and Mr. Xi Jinping. Were there any responses, and what's the issue? Is it just the position of the Russian side, or there are any other issues? As far as we know, the President of Turkey addressed the President Putin since March with an offer to take away the defenders of Mariupol to Turkey and to keep them there till the end of the war in Ukraine. It was done for more than once, but there was such a condition, as far as we know, for them to put down the arms, and then we will see. But now we can see that they put down their arms. The guys are now in capture. But there are no actions as for now. We addressed and urged again and mentioned our questions. So we'll see what the response will be. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Then I have a question. We've all seen that the occupational authorities are preparing to the so-called sham trial, which has to take place. Do you know any information? Because since the beginning, they prepared it for the Independence Day, but nothing has taken place. There are no news about this sham trial. Is there any threat of this? And Hanna, could you recommend any legal position about that? Yes, in fact, obviously they wanted to create it to the 24th of August with the aim of information psychological operation, but I would not consider it to be very substantial, because as of today we know that the so-called military court of the Supreme Court of Donetsk People's Republic is considering the case. And at the official websites of the so-called People's Republics, we can find information that the court, which was planned for the 24th of August, is postponed. They do not mention the precise date. The information is very scarce, so we don't know how many people we're speaking about, what are the accusations and allegations, and what in fact will take place there. However, we know that Azov guys are now going under the so-called trial of the DPR. They are having different types of crimes and allegations, from the territorial integrity violation of so-called Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic, and the facts of mass murders, so-called. For these crimes, according to the legislation of the so-called DPR, they have foreseen the execution or the life sentence. As of today, we don't know whether those verdicts are executed. We know that they can announce the death penalty, but we don't know whether they really do that, whether they kill the defenders. I would like to say that the use of a death penalty is not foreseen by any civilized country of the world, even including the Russian Federation. They have the moratorium for the death penalty, but the responsibility for such actions, for the verdicts of death penalties and their possible execution, is on Russian Federation, as this is their format of the opportunity to use death penalty, as there is a certain territory which is not acknowledged by the world, the so-called Donetsk People's Republic. Moreover, Ukraine is considering this territory to be its own, because it is like this according to the constitution of Ukraine and the international law legislation. So Russia formally is getting rid of the responsibility for the war crimes, like execution of defenders and prisoners of war, and it transfers the burden of responsibility to the so-called Donetsk People's Republic. Still, it is a crime, because the international humanitarian law prohibits putting into trial any of the prisoners of war, because they are ex-combatants and they are the law should protect from any sham trials, except the facts of the international war crimes. But we all understand that we cannot speak about any independent court trial procedure. We cannot speak about any attorneys or protection for these people. This is just the form of tortures over the justice tools which the whole world uses. Thank you. So we are finalizing our press conference. I'm sure that the whole Ukraine is grateful to your children, to you, to your husbands, because you're also the defenders and you're really impacting the decision-making process. You're changing the way of history. We do support all of you. We're all with you. And we really believe that the truth will prevail and someday everything will be okay. Thank you so much. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes.